Hi again, everyone. Gary Digital Williams here on Boxing Along the Beltway on the Boxing Along the Beltway podcast network. And of course, the podcast network can be heard on Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio.com, also on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, and on TuneIn, as well as on YouTube also. And we have an interesting show for you this week because we're going to look back at an event that took place in the Beltway that had long-lasting ramifications and even reverberates to this very day because this blog, the podcast and the blog that preceded it, Boxing Along the Beltway, was created in the result of the aftermath of this event. And so this could be a pretty long podcast, so kind of strap in this week. There's a lot to say about this, and it is going to be very interesting to look back at this. And we actually should have done it. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. Boxing on the Beltway on the Boxing on the Beltway podcast network, brought to you by Real-Time Pain Relief. From boxers to ballerinas, for shoulder pain and muscle strain, everything between. Boxing Along the Beltway recommends Real-Time Pain Relief, the natural, plant-based, safe, fast, and effective ointment. Go to freepainoffer.com, buy $10 worth of Real-Time Pain Relief. You get a free $10 tube of Real-Time Pain Relief, the official pain relief of the 2020 Daytona 500. Rub it on, the pain is gone in real time. And by DeborahSpears.com. She has great weight loss tips, great training methods, and great jewelry at Deborah, Debra Spears.com. Well, as we're getting ready to say, there's so much to talk about with this event that we're going to talk about this week. So this could be a pretty long podcast. And I probably should have done it last week because that was the anniversary. That week was the anniversary of it. Instead, we did the tribute to Darnell Wilson. I don't regret that because there's a lot to say about this. And I really needed an extra week to kind of put it all together, to be perfectly honest with you. So we're going to take you back to June 11th, 2005. June 11th, 2005. And this was, I think, event-wise, still the biggest boxing card we ever had here in the Beltway, at least in my 36 years of covering Beltway boxing. I think this was the biggest event. It wasn't necessarily the biggest bout we've ever had. No question about that. We'll talk about that as we go along. But it was indeed the biggest event we've ever had, in my opinion. At this time, I was still writing for FightNews.com. I was in my 6th year writing for FightNews.com. And although we weren't getting paid for writing for Fight News, we got some good dividends for being part of the staff. And couple of dividends I had prior to this was being able to go to 2/3 of the middleweight championship series, see it live at Madison Square Garden. I went to see William Joppy take on Felix Trinidad, and I saw Bernard Hopkins take on Felix Trinidad on September 29th, right after 9/11. That took place in 2001. They rescheduled it. It was scheduled to be that week. It was scheduled to be on September 15th. And of course, 9/11 happened. And then they rescheduled for 2 weeks later, Saturday, on the 29th of September in Madison Square Garden. So I was getting dividends, but we never had a really big card to cover. I mean, we had some good cards. No question, we had a Triple Jeopardy card and some of the other ones we had, but we never had a really big event in the Beltway at that time. And then April of 2005, we started getting some word that a major card was going to take place here in the Beltway. And it was going to be somewhat locally promoted. Raging Promotions, led by Marty Wynn and his wife, Israel Gerger Wynn, was going to promote. And they had just promoted a card in an outdoor card at Prince George's Stadium in Bowie, Maryland. We're going to talk about that probably next month because the anniversary of that is coming up as well. But they got into a major situation, a major card with this coming up. And the main event of the card was going to be none other than Iron Mike Tyson. Now, at that time, Iron Mike Tyson had some connections to the Beltway area. His ex-wife at that time, Monica Turner, was from this area. Matter of fact, her brother was at that time the lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland. He later became the chairman of the Republican National Committee. His name is Michael Steele, and Monica Steele Turner, is his sister. So he had some connections here to the White, and plus Monica Turner is a doctor in the Washington area. So there was some connections that Tyson had to the area. He enjoyed this area, probably because of his relationship to his wife at that time, Monica Turner. Well, Mike Tyson ended up bringing a bout here to Washington, D.C. The place was the now Capital One Arena, formerly known as the MCI Center at that time. And his opponent was a guy by the name of Kevin McBride, known as the Clonus Colossus at that time. And I say at that time because no one else had heard of Kevin McBride, but I had. I had a chance through Boxing Spotlight to do a Kevin McBride bout. Kevin McBride came to the Showplace Arena in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and he fought on a card against a guy by the name of James Truesdale out of Washington, D.C. Now, at that time, Kevin McBride was being handled by the same people who were handling Lennox Lewis, world champion Lennox Lewis at that time. And at that time, he was known, believe it or not, and he was 6'6", 6'7", and he was known as the Fighting Leprechaun. Fighting Leprechaun. And so I'd had a chance to see him in August of 1994, August 26, 1994. Kevin McBride stopped James Truesdale in the third round. So I had an advantage a little bit because I had actually seen Kevin McBride compete. And a lot of things changed with that situation too, because Kevin McBride was managed, like Lennox Lewis was at the time, by Frank Maloney, who now lives life as a woman. She's now Kelly Maloney. And so that was one of those long-range ramifications that I talked about. And that was even before the bout. Even Kevin McBride, Mike Tyson fight had come about. But no one else had seen him. Now, between the fact that I had actually seen Kevin McBride and the fact that I was working for Fight News, that gave me a little bit of a status in the boxing world at that time. And the mainstream media reached out to Fight News. And they reached out primarily because I was leading the Washington team at that time, the D.C. area Beltway team, along with my partners at the time, Julian Bergauer and Priceless Steve Price. We were the point of contact for a lot of mainstream media. So I did a lot of interviews with mainstream media leading up to the bout. Matter of fact, I remember distinctly, I was working my full-time job at that time. I was at Spring Garden High School, which is in Northeast DC. And I remember particularly riding a metro bus to Howard University, where one of the press conferences was going to be. And I remember doing a radio interview on my phone as I was going to the event. I was kind of loud and I was getting on some people's nerves on the bus, but I had to do the interview. That's when they called me. So I was doing the interview. So that was very interesting. No question about that. So our press conferences for the bout, and the press conferences were held at Howard University primarily because one of the people involved with the promotion was a man who I do have a lot of respect for. No question about that. And I've gotten to know him and consider him somewhat of a friend. He has people that I know, and we know a lot of the same people. He, of course, was a Howard grad, and he was in boxing before because he used to manage one Riddick Bowe. And we're talking about Rock Newman. Rock Newman got involved with the promotion, the Raging Promotions, and also P&G Promotions, which was run by a guy named Daryl Stuckey. And so they were involved with that. Now, I lost a little respect for Rock Newman, in all honesty, during the days leading up to the bout, because what normally happens here in the Beltway is that when a big bout takes place, it's normally televised. In this case, this was on a Showtime pay-per-view show. What normally happens is that our ring announcer in the area, Henry Discombobulating Jones, does usually the undercard And somebody like Michael Buffer, or in this case with Jimmy Lennon Jr., would do the televised portion of the card. And, Henry kind of resigns himself to that. But in this case, and I remember hearing it, being in the room when it happened, Rod Newman had a fit. And he would say that Jones would never work in this town again and blah, blah, blah. And he was just going just crazy over this. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And I wanted to say something, but I thought better of it, in all honesty. And what happened was Ron Harris, who was a very good friend of mine, and also the brother and a good friend of Rod Newman's great friend, Glenn Harris, the legendary sportscaster here in the area. Ron Harris did the undercard. And I was a little ticked off by it. And I know Henry was very ticked off about it. But we couldn't do much about it. The press conference itself was very interesting. Got a chance to meet some very good people, including Joey Gamache, who was handling a boxer at the time by the name of Chris Smith. And I got a chance to interview Gamache about some of the safety rules, because he had been in a bout a few years prior to this where he almost got killed in the bout. And so I had a chance to talk about that with him. The card itself was a pretty good card. And number beltweight boxers were on the card. The main event, of course, was McBride and Tyson. The co-feature was Layla Ali. This is Layla Ali's second appearance in the beltway. She was on that card we're going to talk about next month in Bowie, Maryland. She was the main event of that card. And she took on a lady who was from the mixed martial arts world by the name of Erin Tohill. And the bout was for the WBC and WIBA Super Middleweight Championship. Okay, so I was on that card. But a number of beltweight boxers were on the show. Sean Ray Mitchell was in an NABA welterweight championship, the former WBA super lightweight champion. He was taking on that Chris Smith we talked about for the NABA welterweight title. Also, Anthony Peterson was on the card in a 6-round bout against Wayne the Animal Fletcher. Lamont Peterson was scheduled to be on the card, and if you look at some of the posters, he's actually on one of the posters, but his bout for some reason was scratched. Had an all beltweight bout between Ron Teflon Boyd of DC and Joey Van Daniker, who was out of Baltimore, Maryland, was on that card. And also Ty Barnett took on Michael Sawyers. Ty Barnett of DC took on Michael Sawyers. So that was the card that was scheduled to be. And also we had another bout. We had Hussein battling Evaristo Primeiro. I remember very little about that bout, to be perfectly honest with you. So that was the card. That was the Capital Explosion card. That was the name of the card, the Capital Explosion. And I've been writing stuff for Fight News. Julian and Steve were writing stuff for it, and they were doing interviews as well. So we all got some very interesting recognition for that card, going into that card. Then comes the night of the show. June 11, 2005. And I tell you, it was one of the most interesting crowds I have ever seen in my entire life. We had people in the crowd who had no idea what was going on, in all honesty. All they knew was that Mike Tyson was there. All they knew was Layla Ali was there. Okay? There were people there a lot of people there to see Layla Ali. No question about that, especially after her last appearance in the Beltway area. But a lot of people were there to see Mike Tyson. Now, bear in mind, Mike Tyson had lost 2 of his last 3 bouts, and one of them was to a major journeyman in Danny Williams. That was his last bout. He'd also lost to former world champion Francois Botha. So, and then no one outside of very few people like myself knew who Kevin McBride even was. So even though Tyson was definitely on the back end of his career, a lot of people felt he would have no problem with Kevin McBride, despite the fact that Kevin McBride was 6'6", and Mike Tyson historically had problems with taller guys, always. Even back to when he fought James Bonecrusher Smith, he went the distance with him. That was, I think, one of the few bouts in his championship reign where he went the distance and won. Of course, he had major problems with Lennox Lewis. Evander Holyfield was a little bit taller. I mean, he just had real problems with taller guys. But every possible type of person was there. I've said many times, there were at that show, there were pimps and wannabe pimps and hoes and wannabe hoes. I mean, it was that amazing. Number of celebrities were there, number of boxers were there. Trying to remember which ones I saw. A lot of our local box, of course, were there. One celebrity I remember seeing up close and personal, which was amazing to me, was one of my all-time favorite basketball players, Dr. J himself, Julius Erving. Nice guy he was, too. No question about that. A beautiful guy. And it was great to see him there at the show. But, I mean, just all different type of people who were boxing fans. There were people who weren't boxing fans. There were Mike Tyson fans. A lot of women were there. Remember, this is not too long after Tyson was convicted for rape and went to jail for a number of years after that. So a lot of women still supported him. I mean, we had, in fact, one of the stories about this card I have to talk about was the hearing leading up to getting the card in the first place. There was a hearing in D.C. Council chambers. It was the D.C. Boxing Wrestling Commission, and it was a hearing as to whether or not Mike Tyson should even fight in Washington D.C. It was amazing. It was crazy. And they were people from National Organization for Women who definitely wanted him not to fight in this area. But they were totally swamped by women, primarily African American women, who wanted Mike Tyson to fight here in D.C. And that really kind of paved the way for the bout to even take place. But it was, I mean, incredible. It was incredible to see. And there were two ladies who were from National Organization for Women, and they were sitting off to the side, and they were so afraid to even speak in opposition to having Mike Tyson here. And it was amazing. It really was. That was amazing. That was like a couple of months before the fight even took place, was announced, I believe. So the card will take place, and go over the card real quickly. Ty Barnett won a 4-round unanimous decision over Michael Salyers. Ron Boyd won by second-round disqualification over Joey Van Daneker. Anthony Peterson scored a 6-round TKO over Wayne Fletcher. Hussein won a 10-round unanimous decision over Evaristo Primero. In one of the co-featured bouts, Layla Ali scored a 3rd-round TKO over Erin Tohill with her father, Muhammad Ali, in attendance. And then Shamri Mitchell would win by 5th-round technical decision over Chris Smith. The bout was stopped because of cuts. Went to scorecards, and Shamri Mitchell won by unanimous technical decision in that event. And then came time for the main event. And a lot of things in the main event itself. Mike Tyson at that time was being handled by one of the great fighters, one of my all-time favorite fighters, Jeff Fennick, bantamweight champion. And McBride at that time was being handled by Goody Petronelli, late Goody Petronelli, who was the, of course, well-known trainer for Marvelous Marvin Hagler. So, and by that time, Kevin McBride had moved to Brockton, Massachusetts, where Hagler's hometown is. That's where Hagler's from. So, there's some great people in the corners. And it was just a very unique scene. The place was packed. I mean, the paid attendance was 15,472 according to BoxRec. However, there had to be close to 20,000 people in attendance at MCI Center. It's the largest crowd by far we've ever had here in the Beltway for boxing. It was also, I believe, the first and maybe the last pay-per-view telecast we've had here in the Beltway. I can't remember anyone before, and I can't remember anyone since that we've had here in the Beltway. Showtime pay-per-view. Steve Albert and Al Bernstein did the commentary with Jim Gray doing the interviews. Referee for McBride and Tyson was Joe Cortez, Mr. Fair but Firm. Because it was a non-title event, all three of the judges were from the Beltway, were from D.C. Paul Ortiz, Tammy Jenkins, and Steve Rados were the judges for the event, for the main event. And I love to say that this bout was a boxing excellence and it was a great bout. I can't say that. It was not a good bout. It was an ugly bout. It really was a very ugly bout. It got uglier as the bout went on. You could tell Mike Tyson was definitely on his last legs as a boxer. And I recently took a look at the video. I had not seen the fight in a long time. I took a look at it recently. And you could tell in Tyson, looking back, you could tell in Tyson's face that he really, truly did not want to be there. And I've been saying for quite some time, especially after the loss to Buster Douglas, and definitely after the loss to Lennox Lewis. Oh, I'm sorry, not even Lennox Lewis. The losses to Evander Holyfield. That Mike Tyson did not want to fight anymore. He really, truly didn't. He really did not want to fight. And he had to fight, as he would say later on, to feed his family, basically. But he didn't want to do this anymore. He really, truly did not. And you can see it in his face. And although he gave it an effort, because he is who he is. He gave it an effort. But he really, truly did not want to be there. And you could tell, just looking at his face. And even from ringside, you kind of got the impression that something was up. Not necessarily that anything was faked or forged or anything, but something about Tyson truly was not right that night. And Kevin McBride was not a great boxer by any means. He wasn't even a great boxer when I saw him in 94. He was a good boxer, but he wasn't a great boxer. And I didn't expect much of him, going forward. But the fight itself was just ugly. I mean, there were a lot of clinching. Joe Cortez had to separate the boxers numerous times. By the fifth round, McBride started to take control of the bout. He started landing some uppercuts, started landing some overhead rights. And you could just see Tyson just fall apart. Physically and probably mentally as well. In the sixth round, you could plainly see, and Steve Albert, Al Bernstein talked about it, you could plainly see Mike Tyson try to break Kevin McBride's arm. He intentionally headbutted McBride that caused a gash on the left side of his face. And Joe Cortez docked 2 points from him. And then by the end of the sixth round, McBride, who not only was 6'6" and taller than Tyson, he had almost a 40-pound weight advantage over Tyson. McBride came in at 271 and Tyson was like 234, something like that. 233. He was 233. So he almost a 40-pound weight difference. And you can see McBride just pushed Tyson down, and he sat down on his backside. And it took him a few seconds for him to get up. And at this point in the fight, this is the sixth round, I started looking around the crowd. And I started seeing women, who were just so angry that their man, Mike Tyson, was in this predicament. It was amazing. I mean, just to look at the crowd, that they couldn't believe it. Now, again, if you've been following boxing at any point, you knew Tyson was on the back end of his career. He was losing to people that early in his career he probably would have destroyed. But a lot of the fans who were there weren't really boxing fans. They were probably Mike Tyson fans. who were there, and people who were there just for the event of it all, the magnitude of the event. And it was just amazing to see it. And then finally, Jeff Fennick looked at Tyson and said he couldn't do it anymore, and he stopped the fight. Well, when that happened, and you saw Joe Cortez go over to Kevin McBride and raise his hand in victory, the place went berserk. And especially, again, women. This was the thing. Again, women were just in total shock and anger. And it was crazy. It was, I couldn't believe it. It was just an amazing, amazing scene. So Mike Tyson loses to Kevin McBride. And you can hear him in the ring. And he's telling Jim Gray that he doesn't want to do this anymore. He said this quote, "I do not have the guts to be in this sport anymore. I don't want to disrespect the sport that I love. My heart is not into this anymore. I'm sorry for the fans who paid for this. I wish I could have done better." And that's what he said in the ring. And as we move toward the aftermath of this event, the press interview that Tyson gave to everyone in there, and again, it was press literally worldwide that night. And I remember Dan Rayfield, who was no longer with ESPN. He was at USA Today at that time. No, I'm sorry. He was at ESPN at that time. He was at ESPN by that time, ESPN.com by that time. And you could see him talking one-on-one, basically, with Tyson. And Tyson is pouring out his heart. And the biggest takeaway I got from it was he was a man who was finally free. He could say what he wanted. He could basically do whatever he wanted to afterwards. And he basically told Dan Rayfield and everybody listening around him, and everybody was just, it was almost total silence as Tyson just poured out his heart. How he didn't want to do it, how he was doing it for his family. He was given a purse of $5.5 million, but a lot of it went to his ex-wife and his creditors. He had so much so many bills to pay. He was in bankruptcy court, and a lot of it was because of that. And so he lost a lot of that money. He was doing it to pay bills. He was doing it to pay for his family, and that was it. I remember standing next to Michael Wilbon, who I'd gotten to know through Wilbon's cousin was a classmate of mine at Howard. And we just kind of shook our head and just listened to what Tyson was saying. And I wish I had an audio tape of that or a video of that, because it was really one of the most amazing things I had ever heard. I mean, he just poured out his heart. That's what he did. Just poured out his heart, and he was finally free to say whatever he had to say. And a lot of it dealt with, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to box anymore. You know, and I always thought there were so many people in his pocket that needed him more than he needed them, that he had to fight. It was kind of like Ali in his latter years. You know, Ali was fighting because Don King and other folks were in his pocket. This time it was people like John Horn and Rory Holloway. These people were in his pocket, and they wanted more money out of that pocket. So it was sad in many ways. It was engrossing. It was jaw-dropping. It was amazing. It was really amazing. So that was the aftermath, along with the fact that when I got home that morning, it was well after midnight when I got home, I actually had an offer, and actually did do a radio interview to a station in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, at 2:30 in the morning. So it was a long, long day for me. But again, it was really a pivotal moment for me, because what I got from that card, even though it was represented by the Beltway, the Beltway representatives on the card, but it wasn't a Beltway card, so to speak. I think by now you may know the difference. I think this particular event was so pivotal because it got me to thinking about where this area could go as a boxing town. The fact that the card even came here, and the fact that local promoters were involved in it, said a lot about what we could do as an area. And I always felt that people outside this area know how great the boxing is in the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area. It's the folks who live here in the area that don't know. And it was from that premise that Boxing Along the Beltway began in July of 2005. Because I wanted to really promote in my way and really make notice of how great the Beltway boxing scene is and could be. At that time, we were kind of in a holding pattern. That was the other reason. Our four kings had lost their titles and had gone on to, some had gone to retirement, some had gone to fight, like Sean B. Mitchell was on this card. But by that time, all four of our kings, Sean B. Mitchell, Mark Johnson, Keith Holmes, William Joppy, had lost their titles. Also, Hasim Rahman had won the big bout against Lennox Lewis and then lost his title, won another title and lost that. So he had not been in there anymore. So these guys were on the back ends of their careers at that time. Another bout that I had a chance to see through Fight News was Hasim Rahman taking on Evander Holyfield in Atlantic City. That was the famous that the headbutts were so crucial in that bout that Rahman had a huge hematoma over his eye, and he famously said, "I had a head on top of my head." But I knew then, after the fight was over, I got kind of digested it all. I got to know that this bout would lead to something big for the area. It may not be right away, but if I kept promoting the boxers and kept talking about them and writing about them, that something would come to pass. And again, Boxing on the Beltway was born out of that card and out of the aftermath of the card. And 15 years later, going on our 16th year with the blog, and I think our 8th year of the podcast. We did the podcast back in 2012. Started the podcast in 2012. That's where this came from, and it was monumental for me personally. It really was, because it not only heightened my status with Fight News, but heightened my status around the country, around the world, as one of the authorities of the Beltway boxing scene. So, and again, the scene started to grow, and I think our coverage of the Beltway boxing scene had a lot to do with it, because many people have told me what we did in promoting these young guys and gals would help them spur them on to bigger and better things. And I get told that a lot, especially through the amateurs. When I started covering the amateurs on a regular basis, that didn't come really until around 2011, 2012. Really started around 2009, 2010. We started covering the amateurs on a somewhat regular basis. And so it was a great time. It meant a lot to me. That card meant a lot to me. The aftermath, however, along with the blog, the positive aftermath was the blog, the creation of the blog and the podcast and so on. The negative, and I'm not going to get into this too big because it was there's a lot of legalese in this, and I really, to this day, don't really understand it, perfectly honest with you. But the card itself led to a lot of lawsuits between Marty Wynn and Raging Promotions, Daryl Stuckey, Rock Noon was involved in it some way. There's a great article. If you look on my blog in December of 2005, there is a beautiful article. My good buddy Mike Swan, who was then writing for 15rounds.com, and he wrote a detailed article about the whole story surrounding the blog, the lawsuits and the counter lawsuits and God knows what else. It was absolutely amazing. And basically, the lawsuit had Marty Wynn filing an almost $20 million lawsuit against co-promoter Daryl Stuckey, as well as SunTrust Bank and Showtime Networks for breach of contract, tortious interference with contract, fraud, and conspiracy. And Wynn was seeking $4.8 million in compensatory damages, $15 million in punitive damages. Now, I don't know whether you ever got that. I don't know how this lawsuit ended up. Marty, and I love him dearly. He's a great guy, and he and his wife are wonderful people. He had he and a number of other promoters in Prince George's County who did cards in Prince George's County, Maryland. That meant cards like at Showplace Arena, Martin's Crosswinds, and so forth. Had issues paying their bills, and I'll get to that maybe later on. But it was a really, really ugly time afterwards. Number of bills, number of checks that went to some of the boxers, they bounced higher than a rubber ball. I mean, Mike Tyson had 5 checks, according to this article by Mike Swan. Mike Tyson had 5 checks that totaled about $500,000, and they all bounced. Aaron Tohill was scheduled to be paid some $13,000. That check bounced. Chris Smith got paid $17,500. That check bounced. I mean, a lot of the checks bounced. Some of them cleared, according to what Marty Wynn told Mike Swan, but a lot of it didn't. And it was that got to be very ugly. Commission got a lot of blame for it unnecessarily, I think, because they just approved the card to happen. They didn't have a lot to do with the financial dealings with the card. They just approved the card to happen. And that's where it got ugly in this situation. I'm not going to go into it because there's a whole lot of legalese in this, and I don't even understand to this very day. But again, the impact on that card on me, and I think on the Beltway, was very positive. Again, it brought us into the forefront. It became the card that was Mike Tyson's final bout. Although he is talking about doing some exhibitions with people like Holyfield and some other people. I don't know where it's going to go, but he, it was the final bout for Mike Tyson. And historically, we can always say that. The funny thing about the bout itself, going into after the 6th round, 2 of the judges on the card, on the bout, Tammy Jenkins and Steven Rados, had Tyson leading 57-55. Paul Ortiz had McBride leading in the bout, 58-56, I believe it was. Julian Berghauer was actually one of the unofficial scorers for Showtime that night. And going into the 5th round, he had Tyson ahead, along with another person who was judging the card. So it was a very ugly bout because it was just very tough bout to talk about. It was just a tough bout to judge, tough bout to watch. In all honesty, it was not a great bout. It really wasn't. But it was a very pivotal bout and definitely led to the formation of what we now know as Boxing Along the Beltway. So that's my look back at the 15-year anniversary of the Capitol Explosion card. It took place on June 11th, 2005 at what is now known as Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. Well, that'll do it for another edition of Beltway Boxing on Beltway Podcast Network. Once again, we're brought to you by Real Time Pain Relief. Go to freepainoffer.com. Buy $10 worth of Real Time Pain Relief. You get a free $10 tube of Real Time Pain Relief, the official pain relief of the 2020 Daytona 500. Rub it on. The pain is gone in real time. And by DeborahSpears.com. She has great weight loss tips, great training methods, and great jewelry at Deborah, Debra Spears.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gary Digital Williams. Come back next week with another look back at some of our great boxers and events of the Beltway boxing scene. Until then, thanks for joining us. Always remember, keep supporting the best boxing in the world, the Boxing Along the Beltway. Thanks for listening. Take care.